Hello and welcome to the I Love Me Lab show. My name is Gail Buck, and I'm an NLP Master Life Coach, meditation instructor, and a seeker of happiness. And each week, we're going to bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover additional ways of self-care, self-love, and becoming a healthier, happier you. So thanks for spending time with us today, and let's let the show begin. So I am so excited to welcome Alison Pena to the I Love Me Lab. And Allison, I don't know, your introduction is so interesting. So you're the bad widow. I'm dying to dig into why you call yourself the bad widow. I kind of did some digging into you, and I see that you're a writer as well. Besides doing your book, you did a book, let me see. The name of your book is
The Bad Widow Guide to Life After Loss, Moving Through Grief to Live and Love Again.
There you go. And I actually ordered it, and I should have gotten it last Thursday, and Amazon had it delayed, and so now I'm going to get it tomorrow. But
Okay.
I also saw, that you write for Thrive Global and Medium. You have a YouTube channel. You have your own blog. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about you. And yes, I'm dying to know why you call yourself the Bad Widow.
Yeah. I love the name because people wonder. So I've had pushback, well, but it doesn't say what you do. But what it does is it elicits the question, what is that? Why
Yeah.
do you call yourself that? So I am Alison Pena, aka Bad Widow, and I guess I'll go there first. My husband, who I was with for almost 25 years, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in October of 2015. And in the course of that last year, when you get a diagnosis of cancer, it's bad. When you get a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, it's prepare to die and fairly soon. They don't say that, but if you
My
Google it,
my father actually developed pancreatic cancer. I think it was 3 years ago, and within 6 weeks, I mean, he was out there, 91 years old, planting trees in the orchard. I'm at my mom's farmhouse right now in my
yeah,
brother's old bedroom. He was planting trees, and he wasn't feeling well, and he got the diagnosis, and 6 weeks later, and he was, I mean, just like that, he was gone. It was terrible. It was awful.
yeah, it's 6 weeks to 4 months, maybe 6 months. My husband lived 11 months, and the oncologist said he was 6'3". He went from 263 pounds to 146 pounds.
Wow.
Um, I'm a foot shorter, and I was 30 pounds heavier by the time he died. So it was very shocking. And what the doctors say is they say, slow down, take it easy, do less, you're going to have less energy, you're going to lose your hair, all this stuff, right? Um, we decided that made no sense to us. If our time together as a couple was finite, why would we not live
Hmm.
all the days we had left together? And why would he not prioritize all the things he most enjoyed from when we knew to the end? So obviously he was getting weaker, but one of the things that grief does is it rises to the surface those things which really matter. So our love had gotten submerged in the logistics of life. Gotta pay the rent, gotta go to the job, gotta. And all the things which really mattered to us rose up. So he loved to paint. He was a professional painter. One of the paintings is right above me here.
Can you show us the painting
Yeah.
with your camera? Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful.
Um, there's one. Oops. I could show you
Can't really
more,
see the other
but
ones, but the one right behind you is just gorgeous. It's so much detail.
yep. Yeah, he did gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous paintings. And I'll give you the gallery for the show notes. Um,
Perfect.
But anyway, what we decided was, okay, if we had finite time, we were going to live in that time. So I created an environment where he would keep painting. He finished his last painting the Thursday before the Saturday he died in my arms at home.
Wow.
He was playing tennis even when his balance was so bad that from time to time he would go flat on the ground, pick himself up, and keep playing. So we had to be mindful of that his energy was waning, but our intent was really to live. And the oncologist said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I mean, basically, he said, I don't know how this person is still alive, but he is. For me, it was also important to remember that I wasn't just a caregiver and I would not just be a widow. Even as we fought for his life, we knew it might be a losing battle. And so there were things that I had wanted to do and been afraid of, thought that I might be embarrassed if I did them. So I wanted to speak on stages about the work that I did, the coaching work that I did, and sing on stages in cabaret shows. I had sung in gospel choirs, huge gospel choirs for years, but I really wanted to do a cabaret in a group show. In the course of the time before he died, I sang on 4 stages and I spoke on 3. Now, this was bucket list for 10 years.
Can I ask you before when before you knew that he was sick,
Mm-hmm.
were you doing these things at that time too? Or did
Yep.
it just kind of push you through that wall of fear?
It pushed me through the wall of fear. It pushed me through well, but I might not do it well. I might embarrass myself. I might not look good doing it. And in the face of his dying, his diagnosis, all of that became unimportant. None of
I
that
don't know if
mattered.
you've yeah, I don't know if you've heard the quote is from George Adon or something like that. And it says, everything that you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And it
Yep.
sounds to me that you're like a perfect example of that, right? So you're able to kind of step into it and really experience your life.
Yeah, it was a matter of, okay, in the face of what's going on in our lives, all that those small fears didn't matter. It was, what will I do with my one short life?
Wow.
And for me, it's really important to move emotions through the body when you're grieving, because otherwise they do get stuck. So it's grief, fear, anger, shame are the typical experiences that you have in the course of grieving. And they're not linear. You don't get the grief rising coming in and then you can deal with that and then you go on to a different one. There are moments when they all crash down at the same time, unexpectedly, unpredictably, in really uncomfortable places. So at work or at a holiday gathering or in these different places, you can't predict them and they just show up. Um,
I think I read something that you spoke to what happens when these emotions come up at inconvenient times. Can you speak a little bit about to that?
yeah, totally. It's really important to think about before you get into those times. First of all, to accept that that will happen. Guaranteed, that will happen. You will, in some moment, burst into tears in a place that you don't want to be doing that. If you can think about what you want to have happen in those circumstances beforehand, then you have a game plan.
Hmm.
So, at a gathering, can you have a conversation with the host before you get there about what you have permission to do? So, if it gets really uncomfortable for me, I'm going to leave. It's not personal. Or if I start crying at something, what I'd really like you to do is.
Oh wow. Okay.
to give some guidance, because we don't talk about what grieving is really like from the inside, how it basically destroys your entire life. Um, the people around us don't know what to do or say. And so they do and say stupid stuff. Not because they don't care, they care deeply to support you.
Just
They
don't know
just
what to
don't know
say,
what to do. Yep,
especially if they have not experienced it themselves. It becomes, yeah.
exactly. And even if they've experienced it themselves, what that person wanted going through it might not be what the person going through it right now in this moment wants. And it's different at different times. Okay, you could let me cry and just come over and give me a hug. You could ask me if there's something I can do for you. You could tell stories about the person I lost.
Hmm.
You could allow me to leave and go into the bathroom and cry by myself without making a big deal of it to people. You could not treat me like I'm broken. It's really important.
So in the grieving process,
Hmm.
there's a kind of grieving that you go through, I'm sure, during the process when he was sick and you were caring for him and he's painting and you're speaking, and but there's still this, what's ahead, right? There's still this grieving and concern. And then he's gone and there's grieving.
Yep.
Is the grieving must shift, right? The
It's
type of grieving.
it's different. So the grieving, that first grieving, is, they call it anticipatory grief, and this is a grief that someone who has uh, their spouse or someone they love has something happen suddenly, like an accident or a heart attack or something that's unexpected, or suicide. That comes with increasing complications for the grief, because that comes with, should I have known? Couldn't I have done something? That comes with extra layers of maybe guilt or regret or whatever. So it's different. The anticipatory grief is just an experience of complete helplessness. So my husband knew, he was very proud of his hair and his mustache, and so he had been told that he would lose his hair with the chemo. He
Hmm.
went, he got a really short haircut, cut it all off, and then the next day or the day after that, he got on a city bike and started riding through the city, and something was cutting into his eyes, and it was his eyelashes coming off.
Oh my goodness. Hmm.
And when he got home, he was devastated, and I couldn't do anything. Couldn't do anything. I want to circle back for a second to the singing, because moving through the body was really important, but also the songs I chose were important. So the week he died, the Tuesday before he died, I went out and I sang on my last stage before he died. 4 days later, he died. And the songs that I sang were I Will Survive,
Mm.
Gloria Gaynor. Everybody Says Don't, which is a song about, everyone was telling me what I had to do. You have to put him in hospice. You have to do this. You have to do that. And Everybody Says Don't was my response to that. And then a song called The Secret of Happiness. Earlier on in his illness, one of the songs I chose was I Am Woman, because it was so easy to forget that in the face of being a caregiver, being helpless, all of that. So that's kind of anticipatory grief. That's like getting ready for the grief. And you can prepare for some things. You can talk about expectations for the future. You can make a will if you don't have one. Then he died. And this person that I'd loved for almost 25 years was I would never touch them again. And you can't prepare for that. And there'd be this moment. So while he was sick, I was not sleeping well. I was waking up about every 2 to 4 hours. And that continued after he died. And there would be that moment before I was awake when I was sort of partly asleep where I could feel the warmth of him at my back.
Mm.
And then I would wake up and it would crash down on me again that he was gone. Every day for most of a year. And people would say, well, why don't you just take a nap? I was getting increasingly exhausted, which wasn't helping anything else that was going on. And I would say, I can't take a nap because I can't have that experience more than once a day. I just can't do it. And you can't prepare for that stuff. I couldn't prepare for suddenly being in a place where I was existing, where I was not able to do really simple things. My memory vanished. So I would literally lose moments to hours and sometimes not ever recover them. I
Were
had,
you living by yourself at this time?
yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't even have a cat. I had no touch, virtually no touch. We didn't have children, so I didn't have a child to hug. I didn't have a child to take care of, but I didn't have the touch of anybody or anything. Which you don't understand how devastating that is until it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I am way more affectionate with my boyfriend than I was with my husband because I know what it is not to have that, like in my bones.
So you speak a lot also about self-care. And
Mm-hmm.
I understand that for you, it includes your writing, your singing, right? And getting your feelings through in these forms. Can you speak to that? And also when you say, like singing and taking care of yourself through your body, right?
Yeah, it's so painful to be in the body that you tend to kind of start living up here as much as possible. But that doesn't move anything through, then it sort of just gets stuck. So for me, it was to make sense of my world, I needed to write it out. And so I was writing my early writing on my blog is really tough. If you ever read back a while, it's not easy. It's not easy to read. It's have tissues. Um, but it was a way for me to make sense of this experience of my whole world blew up and I can't see any time when I will not be grieving this hard. I don't see a future beyond this.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't answer how are you because I'm like, how do you think I am? The man I
Right.
loved 25 years just died and the future we dreamed of is gone. What do you think? I wasn't able to work. I couldn't deal with people. I didn't have energy for them. I wasn't able to do editing and proofreading, which was the other thing that I did. I had no memory and no ability to focus.
What prior to his David is your husband's name, correct?
My
David?
husband, yep.
Prior to David's passing, what did you work and what was your occupation at that time?
So before he died, I was a coach. I was working with people to know that they were valuable in themselves. So, what their core value was outside circumstances and outside roles. And I called it the affluence code. Before that, I worked for many, many years editing and proofreading. And the last job that I had was working for an advertising firm, liaising with a pharmaceutical company. And when I turned 50, I hit this inflection point where I asked myself, is this what I'm born to do? And the answer was absolutely not.
Mhm.
And so I quit my job and started coaching. I started finding what I was born to do.
How did your coaching, and I coach as well, and so my
Mm-hmm.
question is, how did your coaching deepen when David died, or during his illness and then his passing?
Yeah, what I had been working with is it confused me from when I was a small child as to why everybody doesn't thrive,
Hmm.
because everybody doesn't thrive. And what I discovered is that there are three perspectives that everyone sort of sees the world through. And the first one is the one that has you thrive. If you go against your natural organic way of being, it doesn't work. And everybody's experienced this, that those moments where you're just doing things your way and everything is working,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
very few people know how to access that at will. So the affluence code was my way to show people how to access that at will. So the three are the one I call purpose, which is focus on doing impeccable work. The second is the one I call love, and that's nurturing one on one relationships, including with yourself. And the third is what I call charity, which is serving a thriving ecosystem, lifting people up. So David's was purpose, worked until the Thursday, 2 days before he died. Mine was charity. So that was sharing what was going on so it could be of service to others. Bad Widow and this work that I do now is absolutely congruent with who I am as a human being. After he died, what I discovered is people have very little understanding of how to deal with someone who's grieving any loss,
hmm.
loss of a person, but any loss, because we don't talk about what grief is really.
I just wanted to share it. So I have an adult son with a drug addiction for a very, very long time, and it's a also a form of grieving, and just it's just this long, painful thing, and it's all the
Yep.
same things. I mean, people don't know what to say, or they'll ask about my other son, but they won't even ask about him as if he doesn't exist. I mean, it's an interesting just navigating in this space and be able to speak your life or not, and all the same things, be able to speak without breaking down crying, or what do you do, if you're going to break down crying. And so, and that's one of my reasons for putting together this podcast, is it's so important to love yourself and take yourself, and all the things you said. I've taken so many notes, Allison, and I thank you. I'm just like going crazy taking notes, because taking care of yourself, but also not forgetting that you're a woman, and a person
Yeah,
as well, and not getting lost in this process, which is unfortunately that happens quite often. So,
absolutely. And your experience is totally a grief experience.
mhm.
And yet people
Yeah,
don't know what to do or say. And so Bad Widow came about. Bad Widow means contrarian widow. It means that if I was not,
contrarian.
yeah, if I was not fine, I would not say I was fine. I would actually tell the truth about my own experience. And the reason I did that was that I kept feeling this pain had to serve some purpose
Yeah,
beyond me. And the way that we deal with grief and supporting people who are grieving is broken,
yeah,
profoundly broken. Because it's not an open conversation, we wind up siloed. And this actually happened before Dave died. We were both going along on our own, grieving, angry, with all these feelings, but trying not to scare the other person, which meant that we were alone in it.
yes,
And when
very
we
familiar.
eventually, yeah, When we eventually had the conversation, we realized that we could be together in it.
Mhm.
Grief is both an individual and a universal experience. Everyone on the planet in this moment after the last 2 years are grieving something. And our conversation about grief is broken. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. The question is, how do you sort of come back to yourself? The
Right.
first thing is, how do you come back to yourself, who you are, after such an experience? Because it breaks you open. And it often feels like heartbreak, often feels like broken.
Yeah.
And because people don't understand what grieving is and how it takes you apart and makes you not the same, they don't understand that you're not broken, and they treat you like you're broken and like you may never come back. And in the early days especially, it's very easy to fall into feeling that way too.
Mhm.
But from there, you can't make good decisions and you can't take action. So you can't move
Right.
out from where you are if you can't shift that part. The point at which people typically come to me is when their longing for more gets bigger than their fear of the pain. So that's when I'm most useful to people. And because it's fine to have empathy and compassion, and it's wonderful to have people who can listen to you and allow you to be where you are. Because I'll tell you, at a holiday party where you're sad and you're expected to be happy, that's brutal.
Mhm.
That's brutal. Or you're there and either people keep asking you how you are or they don't mention the person's name. It's brutal.
Yeah.
So,
Well, so I was going to say, so I want to take a little time also to talk about, because you seem to me that you're very strong and you think through the process, right? Taking care of yourself and being happy is really important to you, which I absolutely
really
honor
important.
with you. That's awesome. And you learned how to hit hack Bumble, you said. And so you got back into the dating game and you found true love again. Can you tell us about that?
I did. I did. That was the hardest thing of all. That was honestly the hardest thing of all. Um, Reader's Digest, I help people reconnect to themselves. So, who am I? How do things work? Re engage in the world, reinvent themselves. So, reinvent yourself. I wasn't who I was, but I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
Um, that's confusing. In the area of love, I'd been with the same man for 25 years. I met him in my 30s and I was now in my 50s. The last time I dated was 1992 and it was 2018.
It's
And I was
changed a little bit
terrified.
since then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was so scared. I was so scared. Um, when I began to feel desire, began to feel the wanting for a man to touch me, to put an arm around my waist, maybe even to kiss me, with that desire, I felt like I was betraying my husband. And this huge grief would rise up at the same time as the desire. So that's really confusing. I mean, we run our relationships. Okay, I know he's the right one because there's chemistry, but I couldn't trust my chemistry because if someone touched me, I sometimes even said, "Get back, stop touching me."
Mm.
Because I had this feeling of revulsion because it was the wrong hands and the wrong lips. It wasn't the ones I knew for 25 years. Now, my head knew that my husband was dead, that there was no betrayal. But my heart, my body did not know that.
Yeah.
I hacked Bumble because I had no energy for people. And I wanted to deselect. I wanted to have the ones who didn't want me as I was, and I was a complete hot mess. It was coming towards 2 years after he died. I was still crying often and randomly, still had second year, 0 to rage in 5 seconds. So all these things were still happening that I had no control over. And I was trying to open myself up to loving again when I knew how much pain losing was, like in my bones.
Yeah.
So the idea of daring that was just horrific. Um, so I hacked Bumble. I wrote my profile with no regard for who the guy might be because I didn't know who I was in terms of romance, in terms of love. I didn't know who I wanted. And I thought it wouldn't be fair to compare.
That's pretty interesting because I think when a lot of people do their profiles, it's they're trying to appear to be something like a lot of the influencers and stuff, like everything is perfect, it's beautiful. I love doing this and I love doing that. And it's interesting. It's like you're trying to attract a certain kind of person that at the end of the day might not be, probably won't be the best match for you anyway.
Right. Right. So I said I was a widow because if that was a problem for them, I wasn't their person.
Hmm.
I don't like sandy beaches. I'm not that fond of hot sun. It makes me grumpy. So I said I prefer rocky beaches to sandy ones. What does that do? That says if your idea of a dream vacation is the Jersey Shore or Florida or wherever, not your
I ain't your
person.
girl. Yeah.
Not your person. But I didn't have energy to say a lot of no's, so I wanted them to say no to me first.
Hmm.
And they, so I got responses. I did my profile, I put up my pictures, I made some mistakes, I got some weird text responses, but I didn't talk to anyone until I was sure. And I knew that I was getting more ready to actually go out on a date, which took about 2 or 3 months. I think I started in May, and July 1st, I went on my first date. My first two dates, actually,
Hmm.
since 1992.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I knew I was closer when the men I started to like were actually in my city instead of 3 hours away.
Hmm.
But for me it was practice. It was,
Yeah.
who do I like, what do I not like. It was what I call reinvent. How do I figure it out? Ask lots of questions, try different experiences, try different conversations. And this is one of the best. There were a lot of places where I did this, but this is one of the best examples. So then the responses came in, and I got some people who were snarky, but snarky not in a funny way, but in a mean way. I'm like, no, I'm not interested in that. I had a really funny podcast interview around that time with a guy who I had. I didn't deselect a lot of people. I said, um, must love music,
Mhm.
no Trump people, and no smoking. So those were my three criteria. So I wasn't
Uh-huh.
saying you have to have this income, you have to be this tall, you have to, none of that. I had those three, and that's it in terms of,
And very reasonable ones at that.
yeah, yeah. So I got on this podcast and told this host these three criteria, and he said, well, but don't you think deselecting people who are Trump people is unreasonable? You're narrowing your field too much. For 20 minutes on a live podcast. Oh my gosh. And I kept trying to, steer the conversation away from this because I don't like going there. Um, it was my criteria, and I stand by it. And at the end of the day, I wound up saying I have a right in my intimate relationship to feel safe.
Hmm.
And that kind of person wouldn't do that for me. And then he went,
Right.
oh, yeah, okay. You have a right to feel safe.
So I trust the guy that you're with now is not a Trumper.
Nope. Oh, no. And so July 1st, I had this date with this young guy, and I was going to brunch. And that same date, I had swiped on this other guy named Wayne, who
Hmm.
I'm now with. And I said, it's a really hot day. It was July 1st, and I'm going to go see this movie or that movie, and let's get together someday. And he said, let's go to one of the two movies I had said, so listening, and let's have someday be today. And
Oh,
I thought,
wow.
yeah, that's what I said.
Kind of like that.
Yep. And so after my date with the young guy who I never saw again,
Uh-huh.
we agreed to go and meet, have a drink, and go to this movie. Before he got there, he had watched me on one of my podcasts, my guest podcasts. So he got there and he sat down and he said, "You inspire me."
Wow. And it was really cool as they already had a sense of who you really are, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's important.
Yep. And while I was on, when I got the responses in, I changed my profile until I was only getting guys who were real possibilities for me. I did not bother to meet any of the ones who were almost.
Hmm.
I only met the ones who were, yes, I would go out with this person, and maybe I would go out with them a second time. Because remember, I still didn't have a long time horizon.
So this guy, and what is his name? Can you say
Wayne.
his name?
Wayne.
Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it about Wayne that was different? What was it? I mean, were you able to get past the feel, I don't mean the feelings for David, but I mean the guilt that you might feel, or the betrayal, the feelings of betrayal. Were you able to get past that with Wayne?
Took 6 months.
Hmm.
It was not a short process. He was willing to be patient. I just had to keep pushing through the comfort, keep pushing through the um, those feelings of betrayal, the grief rising up, the days where I had trouble seeing him. I think the day that and he was willing to be patient. He and I had the same idea about dating. We used each date as an opportunity to get to know each other better. And we alternated dates. So the first date was we went to Whole Foods, and we each picked a food and had to explain why that we liked. And then at the end, we each picked a food that we had never tried. And then we took our picnic and we went down, we looked out at the Statue of Liberty, and we talked. And we ate our foods. And then the second was mine, and we did a graffiti crawl through New York City, and then
Oh,
went
that sounds
to
interesting. That sounds
listen to
like fun.
blues. Yep.
Wow.
But I needed to know if he was on board with the kinds of stuff that I like to do. Um, And we just alternated like that, trying different dating. Um, he was willing to be patient. So there was a day when I had forgotten that it was an occasion and I was meant to see him. And I'd been in tears for 8 hours,
Mm.
pretty much straight. And I considered, calling him up and saying, let's cancel. It's not you, it's me. But at the end of the day, I thought, he's an adult and he can choose for himself as long as I'm clear about what's going on.
Mhm.
And I called him up and I said, I have been a mess all day and I want to see you, but I don't know how I'm going to be tonight. So feel free to call it off and we'll reschedule. But I'm not up for going out to a big dinner or whatever. And we wound up going to Whole Foods, sitting at a bench and talking. And I didn't have to cry because it was okay if I did. So I could be peaceful
Isn't
with
that
how I
something? It's
was.
not like you didn't feel like you had to hold anything in. If you wanted to let it out, you could, which means you didn't have that pressure, right?
Yep,
That grip.
yep. But he was so incredibly patient. It was, I had, my husband died, and then there were a lot of occasions. So he died September 10th, October 5th was the memorial service. Um, no, October 1st was the memorial service. October 5th would have been our 20th wedding anniversary. And it went like that till the end of the year. So I guess October or something, I called up Wayne and I said, you might just not want to see me till January. It's
Mhm.
going to be a hard few months, and you just go off and do your thing, and we'll reconvene in January. And he was like, everything was going well, so he was a little, what is going on here? But he said, okay. And 2 days later, I called him up and I said, my cousin is showing a feature film at MoMA. I'm going with my mom, and would you like to come with us? Now, this is 2 days later. It is not January.
Yeah, yeah.
But he just was willing. If I was willing to keep pushing through, he was willing to go on the journey with me.
That's I love that. You know what? And I just want to because we're going to have to wrap up here for time. But well, first of all, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of share what you do because we might have some listeners that might want to reach out to you. And I know that you do coaching. And can you speak a little bit about that and how somebody might be able to reach you?
Yes, the best way to reach me is I have a website called badwidow.com where you can find many things about me. Um, and I do coaching with a really specific framework to move people through the grief. So it's reconnect with yourself, it's re engage in the world, it's reinvent who you are after the loss because you're not the same person, and it's rebuild your networks because we all know that people either step up, step back, or step out.
Yeah.
And so, from wherever the person is who's grieving, I move them through these places, which are the places anyone who's grieving needs to move through to go from existing back to thriving.
Did you find that you had to rebuild your network?
Absolutely.
And did you rebuild it differently?
Yes, because what I needed was different. I
Different
needed,
kinds of people or different.
well, I mean, there were some people from my old network who stepped up. My mom has been incredible through all of this. She
Mhm.
actually is the editor on my book.
Oh,
There are 9 rounds of edits, and it's a very true book, as you'll see. Um, But there were also people who were not that way. And there were
Mhm.
people that I needed that I hadn't needed. So when you lose a spouse, especially, they comfort you, they cheer you on, they, stand for you. They do stuff. You don't need to find someone to go out and have dinner with. You don't need to find someone. And so the holes that they leave are unimaginable.
Mhm.
And there's no network that's built to fill that. So I started thinking of networks in a different way. Like, what did I need? What did I want to do? What was I longing for? And how could someone, who did I need in my network to fulfill those? Thinking of a network as a resource and then thinking about what I longed to do and matching them up, that was key.
Wow.
That was key. If I wanted to go do yoga, is there someone who would go with me? Just to give me shared experience, to give me community. Um, yeah, so it was necessary. And I have people from my old network and I have new people, but it's all based on who I am now.
Mhm.
There are issues with both. With the old people, they knew you as you were. And it would be really more comfortable for them if you would go back to that person,
Uh-huh.
except that you're not that person anymore. So you can't. So the people who tend to remain from the old network are the people who will come around to being okay with that you're different. That for you, it's history, important
Well,
history, but
and I
history.
think, like, based on the things that you say, like, I just wanna just, oh my gosh, like, just call out some of the things that I just love about you already. I mean, I love that your ability, I'm serious, to push through the fear and to push through the discomfort and to get on stage and to basically fight for your life in a positive way, right? To
Mm-hmm.
be a better you. I admire that so much about you. I think it's so huge. And I think already in the short time that we've spent together, like I said, I've taken so many notes. And I'm sure that the coaching you provide is a game changer uh, for your clients. And did I cut you off when you actually were saying how they can contact you? I think I did.
No, badwidow.com.
Okay. All
Come to
right.
badwidow.com.
All right, great. And I would love to have you back. I hope you're open to that. And I'm actually creating a summit for people like in my circumstance where you're in the grieving process of your child or loved one with a drug addiction. And I think that you would be an amazing piece of that. So I'll be reaching out to you on that as well.
Wonderful. I love it.
Okay. And thank you so much for being with me today. We are going to have links, if that's okay with you, to your social media accounts and to your Bad Widow website and any other links that you provide for me. And any final words on, if you were going to give somebody one piece of advice on self-care and caring for themselves, what would that be?
My most valuable advice is in a moment where you don't feel like you can trust your own judgment and who you are, trust yourself. People come at you with lots and lots and lots of advice. You must do this. You should do that. At the end of the day, whatever you choose to do, you will live with the consequences, not them. So trust yourself. Take the time you need to filter what people say and what people advise through your own filter of there's a book I'm reading that I love. If I loved myself, would I do this or not? Would I be with this
Mm,
person or not? If I
wow.
loved myself, what would I do next? And trust yourself. It's that.
Thank you. And I'm going to shout out a big heart bomb to you. And I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so
Definitely.
much.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it and want more information on our guests and resources, please visit ilovemelab.com. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe and share with a friend. Hey, there's more great episodes to come. So until next time.